Hello, everyone. Welcome to day 3. Glad to have you back. Here we are again with the wonderful Tanny Anthony, who's going to just bring it all home for us today. So if you can, just make sure you're muted and your window's closed. We have the interpreters that are spotlighted. At the end of the session, we are going to send a link. I think we're going to put it in the chat, but maybe my friend Jen may come on and say differently. It will be your evaluation of the last few days together. So when you complete that evaluation, it will automatically send you a certificate of attendance. So please, we actually value the evaluations. Gives us some really great information, also gives us next steps, and we get a thumb on the pulse of what may be needed out there. So please complete the evaluation. We really, really appreciate it. If you need anything again during, or we're going to use the chat box again, so feel free to put anything in the chat. You can hit us with a direct message or group message. And so we will continue to give that feedback to Tanny as we go. Okay, Tanny, you're up. Take it away, girlfriend.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to share and I'm going to make sure I have sound. Okay, we are almost ready to go and we're going to start the PowerPoint. Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming back. Today is August 3rd. You know, when Donna asked me to do this, August 1st, 2nd, 3rd seemed like a really long time before we would be meeting. And here we are. It's kind of stunning to me that, I don't know about you all, but Colorado schools are, many of them are back in session. So I want to just start, see if there's any questions about content thus far. Yesterday, I really appreciated people using the chat. Thank you for doing that. I think there was some just great commentary and questions and examples. So if you do have something that is kind of bugging you or you had a query about, put it in the chat. And if we don't hear something, I'm going to get started. Anything in the chat, Donna?
Nothing in the chat.
Okay, we're going to get started. But if you think of something, just take the opportunity so that your learning needs are met. And if I don't know it, trust me, one of the things we'll do is just poll the audience, because that's the best part of transdisciplinary life, is that if you don't know, you probably have a colleague that does. Okay, so we're going to get started. So here's what we're going to do today, and I'm hoping that the videos work. We didn't practice them, so I just realized I need to make sure they work. But here's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about putting things together. So far we've talked about, you know, just learning a little bit about dual sensory loss. What are the factors that really create the combinations of deaf blindness that you may discover in your practice or with your child? Then we talked about the importance of identification. And then yesterday we spent time really kind of diving into the characteristics of when do we get worried? What kind of trips the trigger that maybe we have a child who needs to see one of those clinical specialists for the diagnosis of deaf blindness or combined vision and hearing loss. So today we're going to talk about some strategies. And here's the thing. These are just a handful of the strategies. There are many, many strategies that we call deafblind strategies. And some of them are good for many kids. But one thing I will say is we have a saying in Colorado when we talk about accommodations or strategies or specially designed instruction for kids, is we talk about it's essential for our kids and good for some. So sensory packaging, quite honestly, can be good for a whole lot of kids. Certainly kids who are blind, visually impaired, kids who are deaf, hard of hearing, kids who have vestibular problems, etc. But it is essential for kids who are deaf blind. So you can go through these strategies, and these are some of the tried and true things. You may already have used some of them. If you have, I hope you will put your observations and your commentary and your suggestions in the chat. Once we go through the strategies based on time, there's a couple of problem solving vignettes. And then if we have time, we'll just open it up to some strategies, examples with your students. So we spent all this time talking about getting identified. So now we're making the assumption going forward that the child has been identified as having combined vision and hearing loss. So we're going to talk about that there are functional assessments we need to do. Oops, I got a 4 in my recommendations. And we know that the clinical people are going to give us some baseline perspective. An audiologist, if it happens to be a school audiologist, probably will give us more than if it's a clinical audiologist, like let's say a hospital-based infant newborn hearing screening audiologist. But once we have our hands on them, we're going to look for an audiologist for some equipment recommendations. Next steps that could include assistive listening devices for schools and districts. We might talk about FM systems, but we're really going to listen to our audiologist about what does he or she recommend. There are things called functional hearing evaluations. There are listening checklists. I think I gave you one example that New York has put together to try to pull together a lot of information about both hearing and vision needs for kids who have combined vision and hearing loss. I will tell you, not everybody does a functional hearing. There are many tools out there. You can Google it. You can go back to your project and ask, hey, what are them? Colorado did one years ago. Texas has done one. There's several out there that you could use. Then we asked our teachers trained in visual impairment to do what we call a functional vision assessment and a learning media assessment. And these are really important functional assessments because they tell us a couple of things. Anytime you see functional sensory, it should tell you two things. It should tell you the capacity of the child, what can they do? And then it also should tell us what can we do to make it easier. So if a child is totally blind, we're not going to do a functional vision assessment, but we will do a learning media assessment. And that word media means that we are checking to see, based on the child's sensory abilities and needs and prognostics, what's the media that we're going to put in front of that kid? Is this going to be a kid with print reading? Do we need to enlarge print? Do we need to do low vision devices? Do we need to do Braille? Do we need to do other forms of tactile communication? Or do we need to do everything? So based on what we know about the child, we fill in with kind of a functional perspective. And that's the difference of what happens from a clinical setting, like an eye doctor's office, where lighting is very fixed. The environment is very sterile, very clinical, probably very unfamiliar, to a kid who's in his own home environment where you got sunlight coming in from the window, a lamp in the living room, etc. You go from a sound booth that's very, very quiet to a situation where the kid's in real life with the hum of the refrigerator, planes flying overhead, mom and dad talking, kids in the next room, crashes and bangs, etc. So that's really that functional thing, is to start to say what's happening with the kid. And I will tell you, we're not talking about functional vision or functional hearing today. But one of the rules I have is when I go out and I do technical assistance visits, it's not meant as a gauntlet. It's not meant to intimidate, but I will check party from party, meaning provider from provider. And I will just say, hey, what does he see? What does he hear? How do you do touch? Because whatever we know about the sensory systems of the kids, it needs to be equalized. And I always know I'm in trouble when someone says, I don't really know, but the TVI, or the teacher of students with visual impairments, will be here on Wednesday. Like, wow, we need to know this. So we want to make sure that everybody's equalized. So I talk about in that bottom bullet, this builds information about the sensory bubble of the child. So I Googled, whoops, hang on, it'll come. I Googled bubble. So I'll show you my bubble in a second. So remember, we're going to bring back Bruce Perry's great brain perspective. So what we're going to talk about early is that in that outside world input with sensory input. That's what we're going to focus on with the next couple of slides.
Tanny? Hey, Tanny, we have 2 comments.
Yeah, please.
Okay, the first one is there was a comment at the end of the day yesterday. And there's someone working with a child who won't tolerate his glasses, and he's multiply involved. and can't get close with the glasses. Any suggestions? He's about 18 months old.
Yep. So
Uh,
here's what, so
Go ahead.
should I do that one first or should
Yeah,
I
go
do?
ahead. Do that one
Okay.
first. Yeah.
Yeah, so here's what I will say to you. Glasses can be tricky for a couple reasons. One is they need to be the right prescription. And believe it or not, if you ever wear glasses, or let's just say I had my glasses on, I took out my contact lenses and I gave you my glasses and you put them on, you'd be like, no, not doing this. So sometimes kids have old glasses, and quite honestly, the prescription's not right. There are doctors who say, you know what? This is such a big prescription. Let's kind of ease them in. So that's expensive. So usually people just try to do their best estimation of a kid's visual acuity and do it. So one is just to double check that the prescription is right. And that's just confirmation. Hey, I have, and a teacher, a TBI is trained to assist with reading that prescription, whether it's for nearsightedness, farsightedness, if it has astigmatism, is it stronger in one eye, et cetera. So that's one part of it. The other part of it is fit. So sometimes glasses pinch. So some of the slides that I showed yesterday, you see these really nice plastic kind of rubber neoprene kind of frames. So they're not the rigid frames of yesteryear. So we look to see, are there red marks underneath the ears or on the side of the head where the temple goes? What's happening with the nose with the weight of the glasses? So there's just some kind of physiology that we want to check. So are they the right prescription? Are they the fit? And then the next thing is, can the child appreciate that life is better with the glasses versus not with the glasses? So usually if we're first trying glasses and we kind of have that confirmation of the comfort and the prescription, we're going to give the kids something that's really, really interesting. Like, what do we need to do? And find things that might give reinforcement for the whole reason you're wearing glasses. So if I'm incredibly nearsighted and I have a toy up here with glasses, so I'm putting my hands really close to my face, I may not need my glasses to do that. So if it's a favorite toy, do I distance it out a little bit? Because that's the benefit of glasses for nearsightedness. I can do an increase of my focal distance. So do I put that not super far away, but far enough away to see if I get the attention of the child of, oh, hey, here's your favorite, whatever, whether the child knows it by name, by a tactile cue, etc. It could be a bottle. So it could be like, hey, your bottle's coming. I'm putting it out this far and I'm parking it till I get your visual attention. And once I do, then it comes in close enough for the reach. Now, where it gets tricky is little hands can be fast. So by the time I get my bottle out here, does the hand go to the glasses to take the glasses off, or does the hand come out to the bottle? So it may be in the beginning, depending on the size of the child, that someone might be just holding and not restraining. So the goal is not like, hey, I'm going to bear hug you and you can't do something, but it might be somebody just has the child's hands and maybe is just kind of interacting with them. And then we see the object, notice what kind of visual, and then the adult can even help with sort of facilitating that reach. And we're going to talk about some hand under hand. So we do whatever we can to tap dance for the child to see the benefit of the glasses. There are kids, and you've seen all these videos where glasses come on and they're just like, oh my gosh, and it's like a new day. And then there are kids that it's just going to feel irritating. You may also have a kid who's just very sensitive with their face, very sensitive. And so you might want to talk with your occupational therapist, or probably an OT would be where I would go. Like, would it help just to do some interaction around the face, just so there's something that the kid gets used to? If the kid is balancing a hat, glasses, hearing aids, it's like pick your moments. Until you kind of see it, whether or not you can have some sustainability. Depending on the refraction, you can decide too, is this wearing all the time or just wearing some of the time? In terms of the cost benefit of the kid, the cost being I have to tolerate the glasses, and the benefit being, hey, I've set up a situation for the glasses to have the benefit of what they're supposed to do. They're either supposed to in the view of nearsightedness, it gives me more distance. In the view of farsightedness, I can bring things closer. So I don't know if that helps, but those are some classic things we do. If you worry that the prescription's not right, you can call the doctor's office and just say, we're having trouble. Do you have any recommendations? I do know, like I said, some people have talked about easing kids into a glasses, but that's an expensive thing. So did I even give you some ideas that you haven't tried?
I could go on to the second
Mhm.
question while she responds
Sure.
to that.
Yeah,
On
please.
your slide regarding evaluations, you talked about functional vision, vision assessment, sensory assessment. This person said, how about an orientation and mobility evaluation?
Absolutely. Yes. And as an O&M, I would totally applaud you. And I also realized I didn't unpack sensory assessment. So I'm a big believer in what we call sensory efficiency in the blindness world. We hopefully talk about it in the deafness world, but this is all things not vision and hearing that are sensory, but absolutely in orientation mobility. And what we do with O&M is we understand the kid's sensory capacities, and then we plan for it when we're turning a kid into a traveler. This is where I'm located. This is where I'm going to go, etc. So, yep, 100% O&M would be fantastic. I'm going to keep going in the interest of time, and if we want to come back to glasses at the end, we can. So, does that feel okay?
Yes, and she did comment and said, yes, thank you. At this point, the first issue is about the tactile tolerance, and the other suggestions are great as well.
Yep. And that's where, and we're going to talk a little bit about touch today. I mean, I'll be honest with you, like literally that's a full day training to really do sensory efficiency, but we'll touch on it a little bit. So here's this sensory bubble. Now, we're not really putting a kid in a fishbowl, but what I want you to think about as we talk today is once you understand the parameters of kids' sensory systems, so we know touch is at a body level, vestibular is internal to the body, tactile, etc. But vision and hearing, as we talked about yesterday, are distance senses, and to some extent, certainly smell. We can smell things farther from our body. You want the team to really understand kind of the sensory bubble of the kid. How close do I need to be? What angle do I need to be? How loud do I need to be? Et cetera, et cetera. So as you learn about the student, you want everybody to sort of say, some kids' sensory bubbles are going to be really, really close to their body. They don't have the capacity to distance. They don't have hearing that can distance. They don't have vision that distance. If that's the case, you're really making a case for this is a tactile learner. If a kid does have distance vision or the capacity to distance out with auditory, then you're fueling that. Doesn't mean we don't do touch, but the whole idea is the more you understand as a team, the better your consistent programming is going to be for the child. So we're just going to review some things in terms of what helps and then how to use it. So with listening technology, if this is a child who benefits from amplification, things that don't help are distance. So people need to be aware that the farther that the sounding object is away from the child, the less the child may be able to understand the source of the sound and actually what the sound means. Depends on the kid, depends on the audiogram, depends on the listening tool. But distance will be a factor and inconsistent use. So if we try it like every third Wednesday, probably we're not going to have the success if we're consistent. And then always background noise. And you want to talk with your audiologist just to understand whatever device it is, just what are the parameters for optimal use and what are the things that it really can't do. Things that help, obviously consistent use, making sure that batteries are okay, paired with good lighting and visual access, because remember, this is a combined vision and hearing loss. So if a child is working to listen at the same time they're working to see and visual cues are helpful, we want to just pay attention to good lighting, specific language, and then certainly paired with communication. And this is where our experts who really understand hearing loss, whether it's self-standing or within a deaf blindness perspective, are really going to help us. So some listening strategies. We can't control the world always on background noise, But when we really want to be instructional, we want to pay attention. I will say I have a slide in my series on sensory assessment, and it talks about literally it takes to about the age of 7 for kids to, these are kids with typical hearing, to really sort out sound from a congested environment. And when I first read that stat, I was kind of sad because I thought about just how noisy most preschool settings are. So we're even asking kids with typical hearing to do a pretty sophisticated task. So if we can cut the noise, let's do it. You may want to face the child. You may want to sit on the side of better hearing. This, of course, is going to also be balanced about visual needs, but just some general rules. When I face the child, that child, if they have that capacity for the facial contact, lip reading, etc., I'm right there. Gain the child's attention before speaking to the child's ear in a normal, clear voice, so we're not yelling at kids. Read the child's cues for attention and response. That might be one of the best things you can do in any sensory assessment, is not only talk about what type and level and degree of the stimulation that seems to be within that child's bubble, but how do you know when the kid gets it? And this is really important because some kids will activate, meaning they'll get busier, they'll start to wiggle, they'll lean in. Some kids will still. And you need to know the difference, because one person's activation and one person's stilling might mean I'm ready for learning. But if you start to get those cues and everybody understands, hey, this is how I know he, she is ready to go, then you equalize engagement and learning opportunity. So draw attention to sounds. This is obviously for the child who has hearing, that will be able to detect voices as well as environmental sounds. Pair sounds with meaning. So you show the kid what's making a sound. Just classically, if somebody alerts to a sound, take time. You might need to go to the sound, do something so that that sound becomes what the child knows. Repeat comments shared from others. This might be with an older child. So if you know the child missed it, repeat the comments. Don't paraphrase at this point, because you want the child to hear what he missed directly. Prioritize keywords. That's great for vocabulary. And break down instructions and sequence into chunks. This is just a little tiny pool of information. So I'm hoping that when you work with your teams with a deafblind specialist or a TOD, they're really working with you to say, how do we present auditory information to this child? So from a communication perspective, we're going to understand and implement what works for the child based on family decisions and child situation. Remember, we talked about Andrew F. in light of the child's circumstance. And that's going to be really important, because it may be that the focus is on tactile sign language or visual sign language. Maybe there's a focus on voices on or voices off. All that needs to be discussed and determined. There's not a right way. There's not a wrong way. There is only the way of the child. And the family should be very key in all those decision-making items. We hope we're consistent across home and school. We've all known the kid who's like a different bird at school than a different bird at home. Mom says he can do it at home. Teachers are like, never seen it, vice versa. And guess what? It can happen all the time. Kids are smart. It's like at home, I get away with it, or at school, I get away with it, and I'm going to figure it out. So sign language, if the child has vision, should be visible, whether so that, we talked about acuity and field and contrast and all those things. Tactile sign language is very important. Haptics may be very appropriate. Linda Alsep just did a training in Colorado and talked about tactile sign language, and my eyes were really open that this is a viable avenue for our kids who are deafblind. So be careful that we're not reserving it only for some kids, but just pay attention to what works. And as we know, we do progress monitoring on our kids. So pay attention, give it a shot, step back, learn from whether or not it's effective or not effective. It's not effective, consider what needs to be changed so that we can really increase communication effectiveness. So that was a really fast snippet, just really on some of the auditory strategies. We're going to get into more in terms of communication, but now we're just going to do a little bit about touch. So this is sort of a brain's touch map. And what's beautiful about it is that when you think about touch, there's nowhere we don't feel touch. So even with the glasses, and the face can be a very hypersensitive place for people touching. And that's why you really want to spend time thinking about if you're going to touch a child's face, if you're going to put glasses or hearing aids or a hat on and there's resistance, what can we do? So this just shows us just really the power of touch. It's all over our body because of our skin and our nerves, and it's all mapped in our brain. So Linda Alsap likes to talk about that for deafblind, they use their hands as their ears, their eyes, and their voice. And this can also be true for other parts of the body than hands. What you'll see with little kids sometimes is that we tend to think that the hands are like the first instrument of exploration, but sometimes the hands are hypersensitive. And sometimes it's because we've actually created that. And we'll talk about that with Hand Under Hand. So pay attention. There are kids who lead with their feet and there are kids who lead with their face. I had a little guy that you couldn't do it, but I'm rubbing my cheek, my right cheek. And so I'm picking up, I have a tube of lipstick here. If he had something in his hands, it came right here. And he just did this tactile exploration. He didn't bring it to his mouth. He brought it to his face. And when I do this, what I can feel is the hardness of my lipstick tube. And guess what? It's cold, which was kind of surprising to me. So it gives information. And so this little guy used this little part of his body, kind of a, let's see what this thing does. Is it soft? Is it hard? Is it mushy? Does it give? Does it resonate? Is it fit in my hand, et cetera, et cetera. So pay attention because kids will use different parts of their body for exploration, especially the feet with little people. So we don't want to discourage that. We ultimately want to move to the hands as much as possible if the hands are viable. I'm not restricted with, say, spastic quadriplegia, et cetera. If we can get their hands, we're going to go for it. So some just little blurbs on tactile communication. Certainly every kid benefits from objects and touch cues, every kid. So another cue is, hey, it's time to take a bath. And before I even get you in the tub, what do I do to signal that it's bath time? I'm going to pick an object that's relevant to bath time that you understand and know about. It might be a toy, it might be a wet washcloth, and then together we make it wet. I had a kid in Alaska, and this was very high contrast. This little boy really responded to black and white. And I had found this really obnoxious contact paper at that time, it was called Fred Meyer's. It's kind of like a Target. And I brought it to the house and I said, I don't know what to do with this, but I thought of him when I saw this because he loves the black and white. And this family was so smart. They cut out a little square of it, probably by 6 by 6. He had hemiparesis. His worst side was actually his left side. And when he sat in the tub with his parents and faced the end of the tub, it just so happened that on the left side, which was his weaker side, his mama had taken this little contact paper, cut it out, put it on the side, and they would say, Ian, where's your bathtub picture? And this little boy would do all the work of reaching, crossing midline, and touching his bathroom picture. That was an object. It actually was much more symbolic than that. But the idea is objects make a difference. And touch cues, every time I diaper the child, I may do a double pat right at the hip. It means, guess what? We're getting up on the changing table or getting you on the floor, and we're going to take off your diaper. And so bottom line is lots of things are going to happen from a deafblind strategies perspective that are tactile. So we talked about they may be real objects, tangible, or symbols. Signs on the body, coactive signing, tactile signing. So again, we're going to be working as a team just to make some calculations about what's the best thing to do so this kid is plugged in for both expressive and receptive. So that is like really, really short and sweet on tactile. We'll do a little bit more as we talk, but here I want to give you some guidance that these are some of the things that TBIs and O&Ms are trained in, O&M specialists, in terms of once we understand what the visual capacity is of the child and what we can do to support vision, these are just some of the things. And again, you're not going to try all of these. This is based on discussion and that functional vision assessment. that learning media assessment, that O&M assessment. So I just have a picture of two balls. I got a little red ball and a big red ball. And the question is, when does that little ball really make sense? And when does that big ball? We know sometimes size will really matter if we want the child to stay visually engaged. So I may choose that larger red ball to do a play task that's really going to require more distance. If a little person is just going to be hanging out with the ball, holding it in his hands, that little guy is okay. But if I'm starting to look at how far away can I really kick that ball or push that ball and get that kid to move and retrieve, I may increase the size of the ball. So we think of size and difference. It can be distance, it can be a magnification tool. We're just going to figure out what do we need to do so that the kid is engaged at the optimal level for the task involved. Color is incredibly important. We see this with our kids with both ocular visual impairment as well as brain visual impairment. So the idea is color really attracts our attention. And so where can we use it so that it matters? And again, doesn't mean that the whole world has to be bright neon colors like this little guy looking at a bright neon page of a book. You need for it to make sense. Sometimes it's a singular color and we're going to talk about it, but just know, look at the little guy down with the balls. One is kind of a pink and one is a very light pastel yellow. If I'm going to go far, which ball is going to probably be the best ball if this child has a distance visual acuity problem? Probably going to pick the pink ball. So it's just things like that that we're paying attention to. So I have a slide here and I will tell you what it is in a second, but this would be a very, very blurred image and somebody's attempt for a little assistance with color. So if you look at my picture, you pretty much just sort of see gray and some black, but do you notice on the upper right, there is something that looks like kind of a distorted red? So I think this is a good attempt. I don't think it's quite enough, but this is actually how we might use color to alert for stares. So it's just a little bit of a hint of red for someone with low vision. Hopefully we have a cane and the cane's going to detect the step long before we're going to see the red. But this is just an example of how color may be used for somebody with a visual impairment to give a cue. Contrast. Contrast is another friend, especially with ocular visual impairment. And just sort of the rule of thumb is if you're working with something light colored, you put it on a dark background. If you work with something dark, you put it on a light background. And so this is where a lot of times people may have some towels or some placemats or just something that they can do a quick switch out if the task is visual and they want to support visual access to the activity. There are cutting boards, believe it or not, you can buy as a low vision person. On one side is black and one side is white. Depending on what you're cutting, you can turn your cutting board. So the contrast really increases that visibility. I think Beth Langley put this together. I can't read this, but she did us a great favor because she talked about, depending on the eye condition, it gives us a sense of the need for variable lighting. So sometimes people think if you're visually impaired, you just need more lighting. But if you look at that very first column, we actually have conditions that respond better to low lighting, meaning these are the kids that more lighting is not good. We tend to think of lighting coming over our shoulder, so it's falling over my shoulder at the thing that I'm looking at. So that's usually a recommendation from a functional vision assessment. But work with your TVI or orientation mobility specialist based on what we know about these conditions. We may have some people who really benefit, and bright doesn't mean like blast your retinas out. It just means more lighting. So I will say to you, I have pretty significant nearsightedness. I'm fully corrected to 20/20, and I like more lighting in my home than my husband does. And it's funny because I'll say, don't you need a light on? He'll say no. And I think I need a light on. And I notice it when I go to a hotel room, I turn on all the lamps. I just like more lighting, and it comes from my nearsightedness. So you want to pay attention to see what's important for a child. So we're going to talk about sensory preferences, but I will also say that we have children for whom light is really a visual incentive. they just appreciate light. It may be a preference. It may be due to their eye condition that light is one of the few things they see well. But the one thing we know is in order to see, you have to be able to respond to light. So it can be a very exciting stimulus for some kids from a learning perspective. Positioning, this is very important for all sorts of tasks, but when we expect a kid to look, and I would say probably when we expect a kid to listen, if you are fighting for gravity, your very first priority will be stability. So postural stability wins all the time, and it should. If I was standing, close to the edge of a mountain here in Colorado, and you wanted me to do something, like, hey, Tanny, would you please look at the map and tell us where we're going? The very first thing I'm going to do is make sure that I'm posturally safe. And if I don't feel safe because I'm too close to the edge, I'm either going to back up or I'm going to sit down. Kids are the same way. If they're falling into gravity, that's where their energy goes. And if they're supported, quite honestly, if you have stability in your trunk because you're in a good postural position with your hips and your feet and your, it just supports your neck and your head for better sensory attention. So just pay attention to how kids are positioned so that they're not competing between tasks because they're competing with their postural. And then I have this little cute picture of a little person who's standing looking at a book on a couch. And this is beautiful because in this situation, I can reinforce standing that's stable and then put that book exactly where that little person needs it. So it's actually like the first standing desk right there. Familiarity. I have to tell you, I love this slide because when I was a little kid, I was very nearsighted early on. I don't know at what age I got glasses, but here's what I remember as a kid. When I went to the swimming pool and I had to take off my glasses, I always felt a little panicked as a kid because I didn't know where my friends were. And it just so happened that my best friend had a red two-piece bathing suit. So I would scan the pool for 2 slats of red and blonde hair. I could discern size. I could discern blonde hair. I could see those red little strips. And most of the time I was right that that was my friend. So what's nice about this is that you see this image of this little girl who's got the red and white striped bathing suit and a beach ball. And what you can see is once I see her up close and I mapped her and she starts to distance from me, kids start using what we call visual cognitive skills. So it's not that that little girl stays in focus. It's just that I have remembered some of the salient features. So this is true with ocular. This is true with brain-based visual impairment. Some of those salient features within a context. So for me, the context with the swimming pool really helps me out. Now, the other thing of this slide that's kind of nice is this little girl's not competing with any other visual stimuli. So I don't have the swimming pool and all the other kids to put together. But first, if I know her in that good context that I've just talked about, I have a better chance of knowing her when it's not quite as optimal. So here we just have some slides that have come from people who have done training specific to cortical visual impairment. Again, you want to work with people who have this training if you don't, but it starts to show us that we may see kids who have preferences for color. We have kids who have preferences for movement, and reflection is actually when you see kind of that reflective wiggle of something in like aluminum foil or shiny mylar, etc. It actually can catch the attention of the eye. We talked about light, how fabulous light can be for kids. Toys that move, that gets back to, we've got pom-poms and slinkies. Things that agitate and move can elicit attention, both with kids with ocular and brain-based visual impairment. And then that familiarity. So there's lots of considerations. And this is where, as a team, you really want to sit with that functional vision assessment that is either about brain-based CVI or ocular or both, and really start to say, what do we know about these kids? What you'll notice with each of these is that they've been on Black good contrast background. So for some kids from an ocular perspective, that gives that clarity. For some kids from a brain-based perspective, it includes all the other stuff. So it can be the same strategy, but used for different reasons. So color can be an anchor. So I got a red slinky. Once we know if a child truly does have a color preference, we can use that. And there's lots of different ways that can happen. So this is where I can't give you my pictures because I stole it. So you guys may recognize this as a Where's Waldo book. So when these first came out, I remember reading them or looking at them with kids and thinking to myself, oh my goodness, I've got a headache. So what I will say to you is that we don't know exactly CVI or cortical cerebral visual impairment. There are some simulations available. You can Google simulations, and people have really attempted to put some things together for us to have a better understanding. But long ahead of that, this is how I used to talk about it, is that if your life was kind of a Where's Waldo book, you dive in for a while and then you can just quite honestly give up. It's too much, too much, too much. And so the question is, are you creating visual scenarios for kids on top of a kid having hearing loss that is working really hard to ascertain what's happening? And you've really put them in a Where's Waldo book on steroids. It's too much. So what do we do? So one of the very first things we do is you have to meet Waldo. And I'm saying this, I'm saying that I guess this could be literally, but this is figuratively. So we really want to spend time with the object that we're interested in, getting to know it without all of that busyness, all of that extraneous information. So it's just a strategy for people to start to relate to, that they literally may be creating scenarios that kids cannot visually attend or listen. Because have you ever been in an environment that's really crazy and you think to yourself, I can't hear, or vice versa? So we have to pay attention to all this sensory balance. So here we just talk about some of the complexity. So if you have Pooh Bear, and especially if he's a new entity, let's just say he is part of the storybook routine that's happening in the preschool classroom. Everybody's talking about Pooh. You want to give this child an opportunity to see what's going on. It certainly doesn't feel like a bear, but if this is what everybody's doing, you can have a choice of what kind of background do you put. So kind of the rule of thumb with complexity, until you know differently with the child, is one color, one object, one feature. So lots of stuff has been written about visual complexity and displays. So the idea is that we're just paying attention to how much is going on for that child. And remember, when we look at something, so I'm looking at my computer screen right now and I'm just focusing on my slide. That is because my brain really allows me to select. But when I think about it, what's to my right is a lamp, what's to my left is a clock, what's straight ahead is my husband's computer screen, and then there's another lamp. My computer is on two books. One of them is red, which is pretty riveting. If I look down, it captures my attention. There's a lot that I could be pulled to see. So the idea is that we really want to minimize the complexity so children don't have to do that sort that's so difficult for them to do. So this is from Paths to Literacy. If you don't know this website, it's a great website. Chris Russell, I think these are his slides, and he just shows an example of, we got this little guy. Is that Bert or Ernie? I don't know which one that is. But it's kind of like the Where's Waldo. If I really want you to understand that particular item, I'm going to present it in a simple background first before I expect you to be able to extract it from a group of similarly and multicolored objects. So just give you some examples. So we're going to move off of that and just talk about another strategy that's really important for kids, is really defining the workspace. And this is especially important for kids who have blindness or vision that's really at a kind of a low functioning level. It's good for all kids, but for some kids, it's really essential. And I'll tell you why. So there are pictures below of kids, and you just see some containers where things are living. You see some edges so that people are not, the kids really have kind of like, this is where my play space is. So this could be a lot of different things, but what we know is that kids who have significant visual impairment, including those with deaf blindness, lose a lot of play opportunities, because when they drop something and it rolls out of reach, it's gone. If they don't have object permanence, it's gone. If they don't have the motor capacity to search, it's gone. Where a child who can see that object just reaches over and picks it up and continues. So this is why some of our play materials in blindness are things that have defined spaces. And even if you know about the little room, which is kind of a little denning experience for kids where they're tucked in and things are suspended, those things don't go away. I hit it and I bat it and it may move, but ultimately it comes back and I get to do it again and again and again. And one of the foundations of early development is repetition. Practice is essential. And when you think about a motor skill like reaching or banging or swatting or jingling or fill in the blank, we get better at it because we practice it. And so that's why the little room became so successful. That's why defined spaces are so successful, is if things can't roll away, I get another crack at it. Sometimes we'll see things tethered to a child. There might be a little play vest. What I would say to you is anytime you tether, whether it's on the child's body, I've seen like people do like helium balloons on kids' hands, whether or not it's on a play vest, whether it's in a little room, 100% supervision always. We never leave a kid by themselves if there's something that could be wrapped around. So we always are really careful about it. But defining space is a really great thing. So in the home, we're not asking people to redecorate, but we may just figure out where can you put some trays in? Where can you do some things so there's some natural boundaries and containers so that kids don't have this problems of things rolling away. This is a great picture. I don't know where I got it, but it's mine now. What I love about it is that, isn't it joyful? So here's a little person in a bathtub. This little kid looks like she has some vision, but her toys can't float very far away. So even if she doesn't have her hands on it, it's within reach. This also gives her a little proprioceptive input for sitting. So she's an independent sitter, but she's in a confined space that's reinforcing her independent sitting. And she's just having a ball. And guess what? She gets clean on top of it. So you can look at defined spaces all across the day. They don't have to be expensive. They can just be as simple as figuring out a container such as a laundry basket. Use of trays. So we have, whether it's on a high chair or whether it's on some type of a wheelchair, wooden cake pan, metal pad. We like things that have temperature. We like things that have resonance. Plastic is okay, but to be honest with you, if you had a choice between a cake pan and a plastic bin, I'd go for the metal every single day because it's going to make sound as that rice is scraping, or I'm just going to feel some of that resonance. So the bottom line is we can do many things. Somebody was very clever here. They just took a Frisbee and put balls in it. And you notice we have balls that are the same color of orange. I'm going to be paying attention if those are of his interest, if this child is low vision versus the high contrast balls. But the idea is that he can whack that Frisbee, probably hear a little rattle as the ball or feel it as the balls are going. If he hits hard enough, they're going to go somewhere else. And then I might need the wooden cake pan, might borrow that. So those are just some of the auditory, tactile, and visual strategies. So I wanted to be sure you knew about this. I think I referenced this yesterday. I was going to see if we had time, and maybe we'll come back to this. But many of our kids, remember that first day we talked about the incidence of additional disabilities, and one of those challenges may include other health impairments, is that we have kids who are on medications. Sometimes they're on it for a temporary basis, like my little friend who had reflux. Sometimes it's permanent because of, for example, seizures, that the child just needs to be on that medicine. So what I will tell you is that it is a really good idea to look it up in what we call a physician desk reference. So in the old days, it was a red book. You opened it up, it had drugs in it, and you looked up the side effects. Now it's online. So the link below is really www.pdr.net. If you go to this website and type in usually the clinical name of the drug, sometimes you can do like the generic, whatever, it'll tell you, look for side effects. And these will be a collection of reported side effects that are typical. Sometimes you can find things that are unusual. And why this is so important is that kids will take medicines that they really need to take because of very serious things. And those medicines can really mess with the kid's sensory abilities. So these are more of the visual abilities, but I will tell you that when my mother, who was deaf in one ear and hard of hearing in the other, took a particular medicine for her neuropathy, my mother's name was Wanda, and I would say, "Hey, Wanda," and I kept hearing my mother saying, "What?" And finally it hit me. Why is she saying what? So I said, "Mom, can you hear me?" And she's like, "What?" Right? So I looked up this medicine. I won't say what it is. It's a very common medicine for neuropathy. It actually really helped her neuropathy in her feet. Number one side effect, sensory neural loss. Nobody ever thought about it before they gave this to my precious little mommy who was deaf in one ear and hard of hearing in the other. So I said to her, "Wanda, I think you're losing hearing and it's this medicine." And she said, "Get rid of it." So sadly, she still had neuropathy. We didn't find things that worked as well, but she wasn't willing to go deaf over having less pain in her feet. So when you look at these drugs, we got phenobarbital, Dilantin, Klonopin, Tegretol. These are just some of the phenomena that can happen. Photophobia. These are kids who are extraordinarily light sensitive. I will tell you, nobody in their right mind on a usual day in Colorado wants to be photophobic because we are so sun-centric. Constriction and convergence problems. So that's focal distance stuff going on. Esotropia, an eye turning in. Diplopia, double vision. Nystagmus, which we talked about yesterday. Glassy-eyed appearance. So that may not have an effect on vision, but I may look like I'm out of it and somebody may really misinterpret that. So it gives you, and then, hey, look at that, hallucination. So now you have a kid who's seeing something and acting strangely and people are like, "What is going on? What's this new behavior?" Conjunctivitis, which is, an eye inflammation, an eye infection. So these are just some examples. Now, I will tell you, not every kid is going to have this side effect, but you want to be the person who's proactive. So I would say as a team, if you know that a child is on a specific medicine, you can work with your school nurse if you're on a school team, certainly work with the family and just say, "Do we see any of these things?" It may be that that's just the way it is, but if the kid is photophobic, hey, I'm going to make sure this kid has a brimmed hat when we're outside and some kind of light absorption lenses. I'm going to do whatever I can. If the kid has diplopia, you have double vision, probably I'm not going to do a lot of visual tasks right at the peak of the medicine. So you just pay attention to it. So I'm hoping that gives you kind of food for thought about one more layer that can influence the behavior and the performance of the child. So we got a little over an hour, and we're going to talk about some pretty cool content that colleagues have put together across the country. So there are modules with the National Center on Deaf Blindness. They're called OHOA, Open Hands, Open Access. They are free. You can go in. They were designed to train interveners, which is that one-on-one paraeducator who truly, truly understands deaf blindness and is helps the deaf-blind child as being kind of the conduit of information. So we are going to benefit from some of their training, and we're going to talk about 3 strategies. We'll see how far we get. So there's something called identifying sensory preferences, and this has been around for a really long time. I'm going to show you the likes, dislikes form that came out of the Washington Sensory Disabilities Project by Kathy Keller-Scoggins. Also, if you want to check, and it says preferences, that change that word on your handout to appetite. So if you go for the School for the Blind Visually Impaired in Texas, long ago they put together called Appetites and Aversion. And it's basically the same kind of thing in terms of how they collect the information. The likes and dislikes is a really quick and dirty, easy form, but it's getting at what I like to call kind of the keys of the child. So I got a little picture of a little person with keys. We also see a little person that's in the grass. Not every kid likes grass, but if I know you like grass and I'm working on getting your glasses on, maybe we go out and we do something in the grass. So this is where it helps us, is it gives us kind of the key. So when I show you the form, I'll tell you what I call it in adult life. In this particular PowerPoint, they called it preferences and motivation. Here's what I will say to you. I'm kind of fussy in the early years about that word of motivation. I like to think of it as reinforcement. And this came to me years ago because as a TBI who was really honed on my research, I kept reading this thing that talked about how blind kids lacked motivation. And I thought, wow, is that really fair to say a 6-month-old doesn't have motivation? So here's how I want you to think of it. When little people are little, when little kids are little, our job is to be the reinforcers. As we reinforce them, we teach them motivation. So as you get older, yep, 100% on you, it's motivation. Whether you want to be motivated to learn to drive, whether you want to be motivated to lose weight, then it's on you. But as a little kid, it's on us. This is our job to create sensory learning environments that are enticing and reinforcing to a kid. I almost said motivating, so that they build the motivation. So what we know is we want to find out what's interesting to the kid, what's pleasurable, because our goal is to say, hey, it's a really cool world out there. Come out and play, come out and learn. And we're going to master new things because you want to do it. So when we understand likes and dislikes, not only do we get farther with kids, but if we pass that around as colleagues so everybody understands it, it saves a lot of time. So if I'm first person in on seeing a kid, say it's a home visit, I'm the TBI that goes, and I know the OT is coming the next day or the next week, I'm going to say, I got to tell you, we just did an activity with the bumble ball and this kid just lost it over the vibration. Absolutely loved it. Guess what OT is going to do? Guess what? And we're all going to say, what can we do that has some resonance or some vibration, so that we understand it. Conversely, if I go in and I'm loud and I'm like, hey, how you doing? And I shut a kid down, I want to pass that off too. Hey, I just startled this kid because I was loud before I was visually present. Does that make sense? So we're going to package this so that we can create more consistent results for how we do programming. So you can either ask a kid, but if the kid's little, we're going to observe and we're going to talk to the people who know the child well. So you may talk with a family and they may say, let me tell you, I got a list. Here's the likes, here's the dislikes. I've actually worked with moms who said, I don't know anything she likes. I don't know, Tanny. And that's when my job begins. Because if mama doesn't know, we got to figure it out together. And I'm going to tell you, those have been some of my most successful and profound visits where we've just really worked to say, what is she like? And we really understand it. And guess what? Oftentimes it's mama. And oftentimes it's the way mama picks her up. And oftentimes it's the way that there's a sweetness between them because without even thinking, mom does something with her hands that comforts this child. And you may be the first person to name it. She likes it when you, and I know it by. Those are really important discussions. So this dislike, likes and dislike forms that Kathy put together, one side of it is likes, one is dislikes, and then it goes through people, objects, places, clothing, sound, music, touch styles, movement, vibration, rhythm, resonance, color, lights, reflection, sense, taste. So she's kind of covered a lot of the spectrum, and you can even add to it. I mean, I will tell you, look at it. So here's the form. And what you'll see is we got a little happy face here, and we're going to see an unhappy face. So happy is like, unhappy is dislike. And she's put this together in things that we might see across the day of a child. So what about food, smells, touch, movement, vibration, etc. So she has it on here. And then the same thing is on as dislike. So the goal is through observation and interview, and if a child can tell you, you're populating this. So here's how I look for the adult version. I think this would be a good dating form. Can you imagine if this is what you took out on the date and you did it your first date, how much time you would save that people would understand, what do I like and what do I not like? I tease my husband all the time because I have some very strong food preferences and he forgets. And I like to go, I could just flip that form over, like, I don't do sour cream. It would save us a lot of trouble. So with the kid, it's the same thing. You can make a kid pretty unhappy, especially if you continue to do the very thing they don't like. The other thing that Kathy did that I think is really great is when you look at the bottom, there's a place for self-stimulation behaviors. And this really puts self-stim in a positive light, because if somebody says, this is a kid who XYZs, you can start analyzing it from a sensory perspective. What about that? So let's just say I'm a rocker. I'm just back and forth and I'm rocking. Is that vestibular? What exactly is it? Is it proprioceptive? Because what I really like is when I go back in the rocking chair, I go forward and then I hit the back of my chair. So you can start to figure that out, and that can be something that gives you a lot more information. So we're going to look at an example of only one child. In the interest of time, I've just changed it. So what I'm going to do is give you a little time to look at this map on Christopher. So at the end of this, we're going to look at his likes because we're on the happy face page, and then we're going to look at his dislikes. And then we're going to ask you, of these activities, which do you think he would like? So I'll give you a little chance to look and absorb. And then I'm going to just time it about a minute, and then I'm going to ask you what you know about Christopher that he likes. Okay, we got about 30 more seconds. Okay, so in the chat box, and I know you could just say, hey, he likes the little room. But what I want you to try to do is think about, when you look at some of these things, do you get some essence? Do you get some descriptors, so that not only the things that I'm reading, but the characteristics of what I'm reading could be the very things that I'm going to choose for Christopher? So anybody want to put something in the chat that you think's a win for Christopher?
We have, he's a sensory seeker.
Okay.
Looks for stronger forms of input. For example, vibration, heavy work, bright lights.
Nice. We'll take one more.
Likes creamy foods.
Okay, so that's a really great idea. So like when you look at the foods that he likes, start to get a sense of like what might be. And you know, some kids just like things because they've just had most experience with it. But can you get a little more information about it? Okay, so now we're going to go to his dislikes, and I'm going to give you a little less time. I'll give you about 30 seconds. And whoever is first, just in the chat, kind of do the same, like what would be danger, danger, warning, warning. Don't do this with Christopher, especially if you just met him and you want to bond. Okay, anything in the chat yet?
So I'm assuming that we wasn't, are we talking about what the likes are?
We're talking about
The dis-
dislikes.
Dislikes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't bring coloring book or a quiet activity
Okay.
or quiet toys.
Okay. So items without sound.
Or don't give him a stuffy or a teddy bear.
Great. So in just a matter of minute and a half, if we were making a home visit or a preschool visit to Christopher, you already have a little bit of sense of, don't go here, yes, go here. So here's the question. If we knew, would we do a marker to color a picture of an apple, rock forward to grab heavily bolts and drop them in a can so he can hear a loud sound they make, clap while listening to a song sung at circle time, sit and look at a book being read at circle time? So who wants to put in chat which one you think that we'd pack in our pack or we'd pull off the preschool shelf?
Looks like letter B is the winner.
B is the winner. Winner, winner, chicken dinner. So this is just an example of why we do it, is that, you know, sometimes we collect information and then it's like, well, that's nice. But this really is kind of that entrance into the world for the child. Now, let's just say it is circle time and it's time to read a book. We may say to ourselves, okay, we're not just going to exempt Christopher from circle time and literacy. What else can we do? So I will just give you one example. If I know he really likes the heavy bolts in the can, what can I do to make a book about that? You know, can I put a few bolts on a couple of pages? Can I do a shiny image of the can? If you can see it, make it out of aluminum foil. And at the very last, maybe there's a way to pull it apart and drop a bolt in. What can I do? Because I want to give him that experience of reading a book. I also want to reinforce some of the language about it. So does that sort of give you an idea about why it's so important to understand these sensory preferences and also the aversions? I'm going to assume that's a yes. Anybody else have any other ideas about A, B, C, D, what we could do? I'm going to go back here because anything that vibrates and rocking forward and backwards he liked. So C, clap and listening to a song. Could we stand and go or sit with him in my lap and we could go forward so that we're clapping together? So again, what can you take that you know he likes and start to pair it with something that's not as easy for him? So just starts to give you some ideas.
Create a book with some bolts using a pegboard book.
Nice. Oh, yeah, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful.
Use bells or tambourine to hit or clap it during songs.
Love it, love it. So when we read this, we don't really know what he sees and hears, but we know that vibration is really big. Bells, we got some bells, so I'm thinking, I don't know if that's resonance or if that's sound. So we're starting to get a little bit of ideas, but it starts to kind of tell you he's also a kid who has some real strong movement preferences. Yeah, noises, bells, banging. So again, bright yellow. Use that light box. So again, if I do story time, do I have a better opportunity if I use a light box? So that is absolutely great. What I will tell you is when I teach people how to write reports, I always, in the end of the report where we do the recommendations, I do the why. So the why is, and I don't know Christopher well enough, so I'm making this up. Christopher hears best when sounds are loud, such as blah, blah, blah. Christopher has a preference for yellow. It draws his attention. So I give the why, and then I give the what are we going to do with it. So I remind people, why is this an effective strategy? Because sometimes people don't know why we've recommended something. And it can also be when presenting an object, make sure that it is a singular object on a dark background. It's a light object. And then I'm going to explain the why. Christopher has trouble discerning one object from another when they are close together or on a complex background. You're always telling people the why, so I can set up the what, the how, the when. So the why goes a long way. So I just wanted to put a few things in here, and these are my slides, but I will tell you sometimes when people see the linear trajectory of what a preference can do. So this is Leah Haverinen's slide. So we got a little person who's leaning up against a light box. We don't know what she sees exactly on the light box, but we know it's motivating. there's a toy that's red. And remember, when we put things on the light box, it can either illuminate the color of the shape, or it can cause a obstruction of light. So kids see light here and not light here. That makes sense. And that can be very appealing in terms of understanding kind of same or different. So once I know that a child likes light, I use this in my O&M presentations all the time. This is a light trail at the Anchor Center for Blind Children. So these are kids who are motivated to move to and by the light. So that's why we want to know, because these are the incentives for movement. So the other thing is, don't be afraid of really understanding preferences from pressure or proprioception. So she gets into that a little bit, but you have to tease it out. So here we just see little kids who need just a little extra firmness on their body. So this is a baby who maybe sleeps better when you really give that input. Kind of like, you know, the other day we had a rainstorm. My dog was really afraid. I got down on the floor in the middle of the night and I could tell that my body wasn't enough. And there was a little blanket on the bed and I pulled down and I put the blanket on him and it just acted literally. He just calmed down and he laid on the floor. Just that proprioceptive weight on his body calmed him. So this is really important too, because this may be a mama who can never get some sleep. And we're just going to figure out how else can we help that child. This is another example. We have two kids who are reading. One is swaddled, really needing that proprioceptive input, full engagement on with the book. Another is a little boy who's in more of a vertical laundry basket. This is a kid who probably really needs all that input around his body in order to quiet down and attend. So sometimes it's not so much about the activity, it's the support that gets the kid in position to be able to concentrate on the activity at hand. So the top picture is a young girl with CHARGE syndrome. David Brown gave me this slide years ago. What we know with kids with CHARGE is they have very low vestibular, very low proprioception. And for her to read, she had to nestle in on, it's kind of like a mattress beanbag. She also has one leg flexed, one leg across. So she's literally bracing herself. You can feel that proprioceptive resistance in her legs. She's at midline. She's got a hand to her mouth. That's probably like a midline, more proprioceptive input. And she's reading. This is a kid that if I put her in the regular desk, probably can't read to save her soul because she doesn't know where her body is in space. And she's worried about gravity. The little guy on the bottom is was a teacher colleague of mine, and this little kid was in her class and I went to observe and I couldn't figure out why he was there because he clearly was not a kid with significant support needs. And then she watched me and she was having fun with me and she said, okay, Tanny, I'm going to give you the goods. So she called him over and she read to him. But what she did is she wrapped him. So you see he's tucked into her. And when she gives him that level of proprioceptive support, he attended and he read at grade level. And the story is he was a child who was so sensory discombobulated the year before that they were ready to send him out of this school to a school that specialized with kids with serious emotional disabilities. And as she watched him, she realized he was a kid that was just massive sensory integration needs, didn't know where her body in space, craved touch, but didn't know how to do it. And she just said, give me a year. And she spent time doing a lot of sensory work with him, calming him down, reinforcing him, giving him strategies. When he started feeling anxious, he'd go get the blanket, put it around himself, do his own swaddling. So I will tell you, the sensory can be the enticement for the activity. It can also be the backdrop and support for the activity. So that is about as fast as I've ever done sensory preference in my life. I would encourage you, if you don't have that tool, Donna, I can send it to you, or you can do the Washington Sensory Disabilities Project and get the tool. And also look at the Texas Appetite Aversion tool, or you can just, sit down and make it up. But the goal is that you get the information, you equalize it, and then you program with it. I got a little dog that just came in. So now we're going to talk about this very important thing called hand under hand. And even if you use it, what I'm hoping you'll learn today is some new language to support it when it happens with kids. So we describe this as an essential strategy for direct learning for kids who are deafblind. So it is the difference of the hand coming and following of the child or the hand pulling away. So it involves placing your hands underneath the student's hands as you explore or do something together. So we're gonna spend some time. So we have a picture here, and what you see is in the beginning, the adult's hands, both of them are underneath the child's hands and fingers. So you don't necessarily just place it, you invite. So if this is the child's hands and this is on my hand, I'm just gonna come up, I might put a little pressure. The hand on top has the choice of, yep, I love you, Tanny, I know you take me to good places, or I don't know you, I'm out of here. So we oftentimes hear about kids being having tactile defensiveness, when in fact it's really tactile selectivity, that they haven't had good preparation. Remember, I told the story, the 1, 2, 3 story of the nursing home. That's a classic example of a kid who either invites and chooses or does not participate. So we got Cindy Robinson here. So here's what we didn't test, my friends. I am going to start the video and I'm going to pray you can see it. My fear is it goes off my screen into Nether Neverland. So will somebody tell me once I do it, whether or not you can see it? And if you can't, then I'm going to have to get out. So do you see a black screen? Melissa, I can only see you. Can you tell me you don't see it? Rats, that was my worry. Okay, so hang on. Let's start. So here's, boy. Donna, can you see anything? Let me try sharing it again, sorry.
That's okay. Take your time, Tanny. There
Yeah.
also the references that you were talking about. Maybe we could put those in the chat. Just
Yep,
if you could let me know what the 2 references were that you were like the likes,
okay.
dislikes, or
Yeah. Okay, so do you see Cindy Robinson on the screen?
not yet, but I did earlier.
Wow, so what did I do? Okay, let me. So hang on 1 second. I'm just gonna see if I have display here. I knew we should have checked this. Does anybody know how I tell my display not to be rats? Okay, worst case scenarios, we're gonna miss these videos, but you can get them if you go to, let me try one more time. So I have it up on
There it
my
is.
screen.
Yeah.
Do you
Yep.
do you see her?
Yes.
Okay, so now here's the worry. If I go here, do you follow? So now I'm going to the online. So do you see anything on the screen now? It says,
I still see her and the hand under hand slide.
okay, so here's the deal, rats. I'm really, the only thing I know, I'm trying to figure out, how do I go to my screen? Does anybody know? And just walk me through it. You know how you go to your display? And I think I'm on multiple displays, so I'm gonna try it. And if I can't figure it out, we're just not gonna have the video, which I'm very sad about.
Diana
Systems.
suggests if you press the share screen button, it should allow you to change the tab you are sharing. Is that what the problem is? You're trying.
Okay, that's a good idea. So let me go to the video and then open it up. Okay. All right. Every day you guys have something new and fun with me. Don't write on your evaluations anything negative that will. I just know I feel punished enough. But what I don't want is for my good friends to get dinged because I'm stupid.
No.
Don't ding them because of me. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to get to this and then I'm going to choose my videos carefully. So hang on. I'm going to stop. Quiet. Hang on. Now I'm going to. Okay. What is loading my whiteboard code? Okay. Now I'm going to share my screen. Here we go. Now do you see a video that I'm trying to get in center?
Yeah, it looks like a kitchen.
Yeah, now I just gotta, there we go. Okay, we're gonna hear Cindy Robinson. Good God, let's hope she's
Used to
working
improve
right.
their hearing almost
Hang
overnight.
on.
Did you
Oh,
know
this
that
is the
hearing
wrong
impairments
video.
have nothing to do with your
Awesome.
ears? The ears are nothing more
Skip
than a
that. Here we
microphone
go.
to
You have to think about a typically developing child who's got vision, who's
Can you
got
see
hearing.
it?
And what happens with them, when they get to observe something, their mom helping to feed or feeding them, they observe that hundreds and hundreds of times before their mom ever says to them, okay, you try it. Same with tying shoes, getting dressed, bathing, all kinds of things, throwing a ball, playing. They observe hundreds and hundreds of times. And it's not the same with our kids with combined vision and hearing loss. The information that they get through their eyes and through their ears is distorted and it's incomplete. So touch becomes the critical sense for many of these children. What hand under hand is a way of allowing a child to observe with their hands. It's very simply when the hand of the child rests on the hand of the adult or the communication partner, they're able to observe with their hands. What we have seen is that sometimes that child only has to do hand under hand 2, 3, 4 times, and then all of a sudden they've got it. They don't have to observe it 100 times.
Okay, that was Cindy Robinson, who used to be with the Arizona Deafblind Project, a fabulous trained person in deafblindness. So I'm going to set up one more while I'm talking, because this one is worthy. So if you've ever had the opportunity to be trained by Barbara Miles, it is a gift. She is probably, in my mind, one of the greatest educators of kids who are deafblind that we've ever. Oops, hang on. Okay, so I've got to get out of what I'm doing. Hang on. I now know how to do this. Got to go back to share. Okay. Oh, no, that's the wrong one. Sorry. No. Stop share. Share, and then we're going to go share sound. Here we go. So do you see a green Perkins School for the Blind? Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Okay, here we go. We're going to hit Barbara Miles.
Persons who are deaf-blind as a hand skill, as well as a communication skill.
There are a few things that have become very important to me in my interacting through touch. And one of them is I sort of have a rule for myself never to control a child's hands. Because the way that I think of that is that if a child is using their hands like eyes, I want their eyes to have freedom to look where they want to look. And so I, as far as possible, never take a child's hand and force them to do anything with it. I leave the child's hands free all the time, which means I will come underneath their hands when I want to sign to them or show them something. I will come underneath and reach for something, and they can follow or not if they want. If they're free, I know whether they're looking or not. If they're not free, I don't know that. I don't know the quality of their attention. So to me, it's done wonders for my relationships with children to keep that rule for myself, is not to control a child's hands, virtually ever. to find other ways of showing them things and of inviting them to touch things.
A boy who is blind climbs a stairway with the assistance of a woman. The woman reaches across the boy to touch the wall. His hand rests atop hers. As the stairway turns to the right, they encounter a wooden lattice in front of a window. Together, they explore the textures and shapes of the lattice as they climb the stairs.
Another thing that I found wonderfully powerful and enjoyable is to offer my hands as in a position like this, as a way of letting a child know that I'm listening to them, that my hands are like ears, and that they might want to say something. And very often that makes the beginning of a game, and we can play together with our hands. And for a child who is likely to use their hands as voice, those games are really, really valuable. And they often get initiated just by that gesture of offering hands. By those games, the child begins to feel, oh, my hands can speak. We can talk with our hands here. What I realized some years ago was that I was taking children's hands, and I did that when I started teaching because that's what I was taught to do. I was taking children's hands because I was thinking about tools. I was thinking I just use my tool to help his tool do something. But when I realized that hands are like eyes for children who need them to see, then I realized that I needed to show them the world, and I needed to show them what I was doing by inviting them to touch me while I was doing things and modeling for them. I mean, very often we expect children who are blind to do a task that they've never seen, and that's not fair. And so I always, if I'm hoping for a child to do something, I do it first, and I let them touch me, and I invite them to touch me. I don't force them, but I invite them to look at me while I'm doing whatever I'm doing, and give them the model for what I'm asking them to do. And that model, given respectfully over and over, often results in they want to do it.
I can't believe it worked. Doing this once a day helped me sink from
That's
205
right.
to
Let's lose weight
126.
and drink cider vinegar. Okay,
I'll never
sorry,
forget the
sorry.
look on my sister Tina's face when I walked into the family reunion all slim and 79 pounds lighter than last time.
Okay, hang on. We're going to get rid of that. So Barbara Miles, honestly, one of the greatest in my mind educators. So I think what I'm going to do is go back to the PowerPoint, and I'm going to reserve, just in the interest of time, but also capacity of you watching me go back and forth. I'll say there's a couple more videos that I would really like you to see, but we'll be selective. But Barbara was one of the first people to really talk about this thing called hand under hand. And so if you do it, good for you. If you don't do it, I would really encourage you to learn how to do it. And there are this particular webinar you can get at NCDB, and we can put that resources. So let me just tell you, each one of these we won't look at, but it just shows hand under hand being used well. And I'm just not going to spend time with it, but this is just a daddy with a little boy. This is an older student with the teacher. You see where her hands are positioned. She's doing tactile signing. So she's giving the student information, and he's listening and learning, and then later responds. This is an adult man who's deafblind, who has a significant support person, and they're just using tactile sign language to have a conversation. But what you see in all of these is what we hope. So these are the tenets that we hope for, that the student with deafblindness has his hands on top. So the idea is that if the student or the learner's hand is on top, they're free to come and they're free to go. Was invited to the topic. So there are things you and I want to talk about and experience and things that we don't. So that right of refusal is a really powerful self-determination for anybody. This is what I'm interested in. This is what I'm not. And the child is really in control. And I loved what Barbara talked about, that she can really engage the child is looking, because the child is present on top of your hands and staying there and following those guided actions. Interested, watched and listened, learned different ways people use their hands. So Barbara talked about that. She may be demonstrating how to tie a shoe, how to use a spoon, etc. And think about it. If you're deafblind, we talked about that whole thing with incidental learning. How do you know other people put shoes on their feet and tie their shoes? How do you know other people eat? How do you know other people comb their hair? So it's a great way for kids who don't have the visual capacity or the auditory capacity to listen to those words or a combination therein to really feel what's expected in order to complete a task. So that self-determination is huge, independence, initiation. So one of the compromises of significant vision loss is visual imitation, which is a lot of motor skills. You know, many parents will tell you, I have no idea how he sure learned to do that. Well, they just watched it and the next day they imitated it. So lots of things happen again through that incidental learning mode. Able to observe what another person's modeling the action, which is back to that imitation, and then also just having a communication dialogue. So it's a very important thing. I won't show you this one. I'm going to show you a later one of Orion, who is profoundly deaf and totally blind. And this was just an opportunity to see his support person, one of his service providers, doing it the first time. And she's nervous. So I will tell you, the first time you do it doesn't mean it's going to be absolutely magic that all of a sudden a child follows you. But you can hear her delight in this because she's actually showing him something through a hand underhand methodology, and it works. And you actually hear her say it works. Now, the one thing about this video that's important is that it's noisy. People are talking. And so what I would say to you is that that's probably fair game in this situation because it's not distracting the child. But as a general rule, if you have this many big people working with this young boy, you want the environment to be quiet so that he can really listen and learn and follow. So that's the only caution I would give is, you know, sometimes we see people doing things and they're you know, talking to their colleague about what they had for lunch and where they're going for dinner, etc. And the bottom line is you're interfering, you're kind of polluting that kid's auditory environment. And so do what you can to be quiet. If you talk, you better be pretty clear that you're not interrupting the child. So here's a little person, and this clip basically is just how she's invited. So I'm going to save it, but it's a nice clip just to show how somebody intervenes and offers, and the offering isn't directly to her hand, it's under her hand for her choice of plaything. So just here's the definition. She moved her squeaky toy close, lightly touched her arm before they explored the object together. So again, we're not directing hand over hand, we're inviting. It's kind of like, think about making a suggestion. What do you think about this? Does this seem worthy? Okay, also hand under hand can be used to teach topics, skills, or concepts. So we just have some examples. In this example, it's a topic. And one of the things that we think about with deafblindness a lot is what are the topics of conversation for children? Because they're just learning the world. And so in this particular aspect, there's a topic about this sign, and you can see where that finger is going. That's something glued on that's kind of got a tactile piece, and they're exploring it together. So it could be that you have a bracelet on. It could be that your earrings are of interest. It could be that something you're wearing or the child's wearing or something in real close proximity. But the goal is, if he's exploring and he stops and he's spending time on it, you can take your hand and begin to have a conversation. You can sign the word. You can take his hand to elevate up Hey, did you know there's another one right above this? Oh my goodness, there's another one. Say these little glass things around the parameter. You can take and actually do that exploration together. It becomes a topic of conversation between the child and you. Here is, we're teaching something. So this is like how to use scissors. So the child is feeling the actions of the scissors, can partake or not, and eventually we'll turn that kid into an independent scissor user. Here's just some concepts, and they're looking at the concept of red. So they're practicing the sign for red on lips, etc. So it's not just to let me direct you to something. It's can be, how do I show you something? How do I teach you something? But in the beginning, it's about we're colleagues, I wanted to say, but basically we're communication partners. So we're not going to do this video, but this is Kathy Keller. She's the woman that did the likes and the dislikes forum, another great deafblind teacher. And here she just shows, we have some pictures that show where you may want to be with the particular person. And we talked about this. There may be a reason to be on the side. There may be a reason to be on front. You can just see how it works. What I would say to you is that if you are teaching somebody kind of a natural skill, think about if somebody was going to teach you to golf. Would they stand in front of you and show you the golf club and that swing? Nope, they'd get behind you and you would feel that swing together. So if you're going through actions, it makes sense to try to work from behind so your natural movements become the natural movements of the child. So just pay attention to what the task is at hand. So this is just a quick test, and if you want to put in the chat, you can participate. But based on what you see with the picture, is that hand over hand or hand under hand? Anybody got a thought on this? So if you want to just put in, I'm sorry, Donna.
Hand over hand.
Got it. Okay, now here's what I will say to you. If she's not pulling away, it's not the end of the world. If she pulls away, you've lost her. Hand over hand or hand under hand? What do you see?
Hand under hand.
Okay, thank you very much. How about this one? Hand over or hand under?
Hand under hand.
Good, you guys are pros at this. And it is chicken dinner. Winner, winner, chicken dinner, chicken nuggets. Okay, hand over hand, hand under hand.
Hand over hand.
Okay, you guys got it. So once you've done kind of a trusting relationship, people will use hand over hands and kids will tolerate it. What I would say to you is just pay attention to whether that kid is going along for the ride. You can feel the resistance. And if you have hands that like immediately go away from you, sometimes people will call that tactile defensiveness. I would say that's choice. And that's where you have to really talk about it. So people don't think that, hey, this kid just doesn't like to touch stuff. It's like, no, this kid just didn't know you were going to grab him, doesn't know you, your hand feels cold. Might be he likes you a lot, but he just came from a session where somebody was manipulating him and he's just over it. So you have all of this on your handout. So I'm just going to go through really fast. Just the reasons. Hands of the students with deaf blindness are their eyes and ears. So we watch and listen. Provides opportunity to learn ways for people to use their hands. Promotes exploration. Hey, let's go somewhere and check this out. Gives you why use hands, reason 3, ready. So his head and body movement slowed down, his hands started to top, he kept his hand under a child's knee. I don't know what the reason is for that, to be honest with you. Builds self-determination, we talk about this, you're in control, you make choices, builds independence, encourages the kid to take initiative, absolutely huge, 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 that kids are powering up. They're the drivers and not the passengers. We basically see more participation on what the child's doing and also a better understanding of the spatial situation at hand. promotes active learning, learns new skills, imitation, provides access to communication and language, and it provides access to the world. So if you are working with kids, I would say blind, visually impaired, kids with multiple disabilities who don't have a lot of volitional movement, but absolutely kids who are deafblind, we do hand under hand. So in our,
Tanny,
yeah, please, please, please.
there is a great question in the chat. How do you invite hand under hand?
So basically what you do, so let's just say I'm working with a kid. So I got my hand up here. So this hand that's moving is kid. Usually what I do when I'm getting to know a child is I get within proximity. And if a child can see or hear me, that helps. If they can't, I may actually figure out how I get close enough so that we are joining. So there's this really great clip of Barbara Miles with a kid, and he's in, I don't think it's a wheelchair. I almost think it's a stroller. And he's next to her and he touches her and he immediately kind of moves away. And then over time, she is tapping. I think she initiates, she kind of taps. She knows he likes resonance. She's tapping on a stroller, which is the metal part, and he can feel that vibrates and his hand comes up. So sometimes if you can figure out either how to entice a kid being interested, or let's say it was his hand tapping, she put her hand, so she didn't even put her hand on the stroller at that time, it was just above, and she started tapping. And what she's looking for is his hand basically coming to hers. So that's one way to do it. It's sort of like I talked yesterday about when I went into that nursing home, I had the slinky. And that when I knew I had him, his hand came out to the slinky and my hand was on the slinky and we were working together. Now that wasn't hand under hand, but that's an example of I created a scenario that the kid had an interest in and his hand came to me. And then if I want to show him something with the slinky, that's when my hand can go. And sometimes people will bump up, kind of like, hey, you interested? And you might see I've got a little bit of distance. I'm looking to see, does that hand come back down? So that's where you just have to spend some time. You have to know the child. And if that hand went away, again, if I've done my likes and dislikes for him and I know you really like this, I'm going to figure out something that invites you to me. Because one of the challenges of deaf blindness is that kids can be very isolated. And especially if they have people doing a lot of manipulation, people may not be their gig. But here's the problem. If you want to communicate, you need two people. You need a sender and a receiver. So sometimes the kid's the sender and sometimes the kid's the receiver, but communication always means more than one person. So if I know you like something and I can set up that scenario, it depends on the kid, but say I have a bumble ball or have something that has that resonance, that vibration, and kid likes it. And the kid's, hey, it's like, hey, I don't need you, lady. I got my bumble ball. Well, then the bumble ball stops. It's on, an intermittent kind of thing. Then I can put my hand and work with the child. So I activate the bumble ball. And then later I'm looking, does that kid reach out like, do it again, Tanny, do it again. So there's all sorts of different scenarios, but you really want it to be pleasurable for the child. And if it's something like food that the kid likes, rocking the kid likes, go to what the kid likes. We always talk about following the child's lead, and you can kind of get in there. Sometimes I have started at the shoulder and I give a kind of a deeper put. Kids don't usually like light, and I may travel. I don't know if you can see this. I travel down their arm and then I get to underneath and I do that tap, tap. So there's lots of ways of announcing your presence. And whether they're going, yep, this is okay, or no, it's not. If you're not successful, as a team, I would talk about who has been successful. What have you done? We're planning something in, I think, North Carolina in November on infants. And we were talking today about identifiers. So if a kid doesn't know me, do I have an identifier? So I start with something like I always have a scrunchie on my right wrist. So after a while, they might go, oh yeah, it's that scrunchy lady. She's okay. Remember, she had that fun thing we did water play last time. So I'm hoping that helps as just some general ideas. use your sensory preferences to really try to get into something that the kid is going to enjoy. Okay, we are going to go through just some of the pace and process pretty quickly. This is just another way of saying wait time, and most people give good lip service to wait time. But what I will tell you is that with our kids, it's very important for a couple reasons. Sometimes the input coming into the kid takes a little bit longer, making its way to the brain for interpretation. So remember, it requires getting into the system, getting into the brain, having interpretation, and then we are waiting for the organization of a motor response to say there's a next step. And what I would say to you is this is very individualized with kids. It's going to depend on how familiar they are with the task, but patience can be a really good thing to see it. So this was the clip I said I would send to you, and I'm not going to, but it's basically Orion, and he's putting on, he's getting he's caught in his shirt, and they're just waiting for him to disentangle that arm so that he gets his shirt on. And what's lovely about it is people are just waiting and giving him. They're not even giving him any clues. They're just saying, hey, little guy, figure it out. We think you can problem solve. And what you see at the end is this big smile because he was successful. So the little note said students who are deafblind need plenty of time to do everything. So we've kind of talked about this in terms of pacing. Just make sure that you are really observing and you are figuring out that pace. If you need to jump in and give a little physical clue, you might need to. You might offer some hand under hand support if I can help you. But I will tell you, I have been humbled more than once that I felt like I've waited and it's my instinct to go. And a well-knowing colleague said, stand back, give it another 2-3 seconds, and then boom, we get the response. So it's something that's kind of an art form. You have to pay attention to what's happening. So you have these slides. We're not going to do this one, but again, just really taking that time. You can do these later. Here's our friend Christopher. Rats. I'm not going to show these, but just know people tend to move too fast. So the idea is, here's some nice things, is what do you see in terms of participation, readiness? And I'm going to tell you, there are kids who don't look like a darn thing is happening, and then all of a sudden they do. So what we know with Christopher in this situation, because remember we did his preference that he lights like that light reflective. This isn't a heavy thing, but clearly who has put together this little mylar kind of scrap of a pom-pom knows that he likes it. So just I'm going to let you guys read these things. There's a whole bunch of steps, but the idea is just really give people wait time. So you can go to this website to really look at these modules. There's ways that you can participate in activities and quizzes. So just what I didn't get to do with you, you get to see. So what I wanted to end on is what's called a view from the crib. And this is by my friend and colleague, Debbie Gleason, who is a pretty wonderful gal. She works at Perkins School for the Blind internationally. She travels all over the world and supports programs for kids who are deafblind. And she wrote this a long time ago. So I'm going to read it in the interest of time. And there's 3 scenarios. And this first one is what helped Meg. So as I read it, at the end, I'm going to ask you to put something in the chat of what helped Meg. And Meg is going to be this little person. Rats. And here's the thing. It's, I can't read it. Do you guys still see it?
I can see it.
Okay, I had to take it out, otherwise it went on the top of my screen. So Meg is just awakened from her nap with a soiled diaper. She fusses a bit to let her dad know she's awake. She looks up as she hears footsteps in the opening of her door to see her dad walking toward her crib. She listens to her dad talk to her as he bends down over the crib, picks her up, and carries her to the changing table. Meg recognizes where she is from many previous experiences here. She knows what's coming. She watches her dad take a bag from the shelf, open it, and pull out a clean, dry diaper. Then she sees him reach for a small plastic rectangular box, open it, and pull out a moist disposable wipe. Closes the box and puts it back on the shelf. After Dad removes the white diaper, Meg watches him take the cover off the big round bucket, drop the diaper in, then replace the cover. Once she's cleaned up, she enjoys the freedom of kicking her feet without the restriction of her bulky sleeper. Meg is beginning to learn to anticipate daily routines and to develop an understanding of the many important concepts such as object permanence, which is something still exists even if I can't see, hear, or feel it, containers, and the concepts that go with that, in, out, open, close, size, shape, and spatial organization. So very quickly, what helped Meg? So what were things that helped her? I'm just going to take a couple things because we got to make our way through two more. Any takers?
Routine, repetition,
Ooh, what was the second one?
repetition of steps in the routine.
Beautiful. Okay, we're going to go on to our second one. This one is what did not help Alex. Alex just woke up with a messy diaper. He has a profound hearing loss and sees faces and brightly colored objects when they are no more than 18 inches away. He doesn't hear his mom come into the room and is surprised to suddenly see someone moving above his crib. Because his diaper is messy and Alex is not terribly fond of having his diaper changed, Mom decides to change his diaper quickly in the crib so they can get on with doing more playful activities. By now, Alex is beginning to recognize his mom from her touch and closeness and is hoping to be picked up to play, but suddenly he's confused. What's happening to my legs? Why am I cold? What's that cold thing wet on my bottom? I don't really like this. Maybe if I squirm away, it'll stop. Oops, that didn't work. But how about if I stiffen up a bit? Still no luck. I guess I'll have to resort to crying. Finally, I'm on my back in warm, dry clothes and Mom is holding me. After that, though, I'm not sure either one of us is in the mood for playing. What did not help Alex?
Rushing through the routine and being in a different place to anticipate to the diaper change, not being prepared for the routine, rushing through the process. Took a while to figure out it was his parent.
Okay, so lots of things. So finally, we're going to end on what helped Michelle. Michelle is fussing because she woke up with a messy diaper. Michelle has no vision and moderate hearing loss. Her mom approaches Michelle's crib and gently places her hand on Michelle's chest to greet her with their special hello sign, pauses, then gently brings Michelle's hand up to touch Mom's hair, which is Mom's name sign. Michelle becomes quiet and reaches out to touch her mom's face. This has become a special greeting. She knows it's Mom who's going to pick her up rather than Dad from the feel of Mom's soft hair rather than Dad's rough chin. Michelle feels her mom's hands gently lifting her up her arms as she says something that sounds like up. Mom waits until Michelle starts to lift her head to indicate she is ready. Then she picks her up. Mom wonders what they'll be doing next. Michelle wonders what they'll be doing next, then feels the soft terry cloth of her changing table beneath her. She kicks her feet and feels the crumply mylar paper her sister so carefully attached to the foot of her changing table. She relaxes, knowing this is a familiar place. She feels her mom touch her diaper and then feels another clean diaper close to her hand. Michelle grabs it and enjoys crunching it together in her hands while her mom cleans her. What fun it is to kick the mylar and move it, feel it move while without being restricted by all those sleepers and blankets. When she feels the clean, dried diaper Mom puts on her, Michelle knows she'll be getting up from the changing table soon. As Mom gently lifts up her arms, she hears the sound up again. Michelle lifts her head up, letting Mom know she's ready. She relaxes into her mom's shoulder after she's picked up, and they go off to play together. What helped Michelle?
She's an active participant in the conversation, lots of sensory cues to know Mom's presence and to move through the routine. The Mylar is a good reinforcer, lots of wait time to process between each step to anticipate the next.
Okay, that's great. And so what we see from the scenario 1 to 2 is that dad really didn't do a lot of prep with that first little person, but she had the incidental vision and hearing to sort of know what's going on and anticipate the routine. The second time we got into trouble because there were a lot of surprises for that little person. Did not know what to expect, did not know who was involved with it, had changing in an unfamiliar place, so the routine was done differently, felt temperature, didn't really have anything to take his mind off of, just kind of like cold air, whoosh, whoosh, bang, bang. Tried to get mom's attention to do something differently in terms of getting away from the activity. It didn't work. Finally, we're on the other side, and the disconnect had left both of them feeling dispirited. So now when we have Michelle had a lot of cueing. The announcement was made, I'm here. The pacing was slower. I'm not going on to the next step until here we are. There's some cues to say, we're going to be changed. I give you a cue to pick up. I put you on a changing table, and now you understand when I'm here, I get changed. But what a beautiful thing with the Mylar, that's a sensory preference. Don't know if it was the sound or the feel, but bottom line is that became something to do while she was being changed. But she also had some object cues. Here's a clean diaper. I understand the sequence and I'm really a part of it. Mom also introduced herself by taking her hand. I don't know if that was hand under hand or not to her hair. But again, if that familiarity is with mom, this is what we do to confirm it. Maybe that little person is totally comfortable with my hand being direct to mom. But there was this beautiful sense of cueing with the child. So it starts to give you a sense that you're using the sensory information, you're using the touch cues, you're taking that pacing down to a beautiful place, and you're not increasing the anxiety. You're increasing the involvement of this is what we do together. This is something important and pleasurable. So with that, I just want to end by saying there's a lot of impact variables. We've just touched on some of the sensory things today, but I'm hoping that you really understand that here's what we're working to avoid. You might remember this slide, that when we do our work with early identification, we have the opportunity for great intervention. So kids get appropriate medical care, trust, relationships, communication, optimal sensory experiences, which we've talked about for learning, O&M, accommodations to access the world. When we don't identify early, we have children who are really at risk for being misunderstood, isolated, having behaviors, and let's not even go there. So I just want to say, I'm hoping that you learned some things over these 3 days, or you were reinforced. My guess is I was speaking to a lot of great knowledge already. And I really love what Maya Angelou said, do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better. So I've left the presentation with just my contact information. Always happy to talk with people. You are in great place for good deafblind support. If you're not from Maryland or DC, the truth is you have a deafblind project in all of your states. If you don't know how to find it, you can go to the National Center on Deaf Blindness. There's a place that you can find your state project and contact. So with that, I think we got about 1 to 2 minutes. If there's any questions, comments, concerns, accusations, love, whatever you want to share.
Lots of love, Tanny. And